Hello everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nihal. Let's discuss another very important web API interview question. How do you version a web API? API versioning is a technique used to maintain multiple versions of an API while ensuring backward compatibility. In simple words, when we release a new version of API, existing client application should continue working without any changes. Instead of modifying the existing API and breaking the client application, we create a new version while keeping the old version available. This allows both old and new clients to use the API simultaneously. In ASP.NET Core, API versioning is commonly implemented using the package called Microsoft ASP.NET Core.mvc.versioning. Among all the versioning technique, URL versioning is the most popular because it's simple, readable, and easy to maintain. Now let's understand why API versioning is important. Imagine your API is already being used by a mobile application, website, and a third-party system. Now suppose you modify the response structure by adding, removing, or renaming properties. Existing application expecting the old response may stop working. For example, suppose version 1 of your API returns a set of elements and after that you change it. For example, you added the new elements into that. Now the older application that expect only, for example, ID and name may fail. This called a breaking change. To avoid such issue, we create a API version instead of modifying the existing one. This keep existing client working while allowing a new client to use the latest version. Now let's talk about the benefit of API versioning. API versioning provides several advantages. The backward compatibility, smooth upgrade, better maintenance, safe API evolution, support for both old and new clients. That's why almost every enterprise application follows API versioning. Now let's understand how API versioning is implemented in ASP.NET Core. Let's understand it step by step. Step 1. First we need to install the API versioning package, and the package is Microsoft.asp.NET Core .mvc.versioning. This package provides all the features required for API versioning. In step 2, we need to configure the API versioning. We configure the API versioning inside the program.cs file. Here we enable API versioning and specify the default API version. We can also configure options such as default API version, assume default version, report supported API version. One commonly used option is option dot report API version true. This automatically adds supported API version in the response header. This helps API consumer know which versions are available. In step 3, add a version to the controller. Next, we specify the API version using attribute. For example, uh, we can mention API version at the top of the controller, and after that we can define the route where we can mention the API version for that particular action method. Here version colon API version automatically reads the version from the URL. So if a client requests API slash v1 slash employees, ASP.NET automatically routes the request to the version 1 of the controller. Step 4. Create another version. Now suppose we need to introduce new feature. Instead of modifying the version 1, we create another controller. For example, version 2. Now both controller exist independently. Version 1 continue serving old client and version 2 serve new clients. This is the biggest advantage of API versioning. Now step 5 is to enable version header. Another useful feature is version header. The API can automatically return header like API supported version, API deprecated version. This header helps client to understand which versions are currently supported, which versions are going to be removed. This makes API migration much easier. Now let's understand the example shown in the diagram. The version 1 controller returns the object which is having ID and name. Later version 2 returns the additional information such as first name and last name along with the ID. Notice that we did not modify the version 1. Instead of we created a completely separate version 2. Both versions continue working together. Now let's discuss calling a different API version. Calling a different version is very simple. If you see the version first URL, it's having get method API v1 employee. So in this and this is the version 1 of an employee, and if you see the version 2, it's having a get method API v2 employee. Based on the version present in the URL, ASP.NET Core automatically select the correct controller. Now let's understand the API versioning request flow. The first client sends a request where we need to mention the which version we are targeting to. For example, API slash v1 slash employee. In second step, ASP.NET read the version from the URL. And in third step, routing identify the matching controller. After that, the appropriate controller execute. And lastly, the API return the response for that version. If the client request v2, then the version 2 controller execute instead. Everything happens automatically here. We have other API versioning strategy, like we have URL versioning. Just now we seen that. After that we have query string versioning. The version is passed as a query parameter. After that we have header versioning. The version is set inside the request header. After that we have media type versioning. Here the version is specified inside the accept header. This approach is less common but still used in some enterprise API. Now let's discuss the best practices for the API versioning. When implementing API versioning, always follow these best practices. Use semantic versioning like v1, v2, v3. Never break existing API version. Deprecate older version gradually instead of removing them immediately. Clear documentation. Every version using Swagger or OpenAPI. Inform API consumer before decommissioning a API. Now let's discuss about some interview tip. One of the common interview question is which API versioning strategy is most commonly used? You can answer URL versioning is the most commonly used approach because it's simple, readable, and easy to test and easy to maintain. Another important interview question is why do we need API versioning? So in that case, you can answer like API versioning help maintain backward compatibility. It allow existing client to continue using older version while new clients can be use the latest version without breaking the existing integration. Let's quickly summarize the API versioning. API versioning allow multiple version of an API. It prevents breaking existing client application. ASP.NET Core support API versioning using the package Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.MVC.versioning. URL versioning is the most popular and recommended approach. Multiple versions can run simultaneously. Version headers help client identify supported and deprecated versions. API versioning make application easier to maintain, upgrade, and evolve over the time. That's it for all this video. If you found this explanation helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in next web API interview question. Thank you.